Hey there, I'm author Sarah A. Chrisman.
And I'm Gabriel Chrisman.
And today we're discussing Storm Kings, the Untold History of America's First Tornado Chasers by Lee Sandlin.
I thought this was a very interesting and good book about a lot of the origins of weather prediction and the understanding of storms.
Yeah,
especially
absolutely.
in America. Yeah.
Absolutely. Tornadoes are weird. Tornadoes are really weird.
Deeply weird.
Yeah.
And since we're living now in tornado country.
Yeah, we had one come, it sort of hopped the town.
Yeah, a few years ago.
That was interesting.
Yes, it was.
Yeah. So they are more prevalent. They can happen anywhere. So they've never recorded any in Antarctica, but all the other continents have had tornadoes recorded at various points. But they happen most in the American Midwest.
By a large margin.
Yeah, and it's because of the geography of the region. It's because of this really big, wide open space with no mountains that we have here. And this is a story of people trying to work out what exactly these are. And I thought it...
And how to predict them if possible.
And how to predict them. And kitties, stop moving the camera. You talk a minute, I'll adjust the camera back to where the kitties shifted it a bit. They're sort of having a wrestling match. There we go.
There we are.
Yes. Okay, but back to tornadoes. We have our little kitty tornadoes.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, anyhow, this book begins with a story of the Wild Hunt, which I just loved. If you haven't heard this legend, it's an amazing legend. So this is from Old Europe. So this is mostly pre-Roman Northern Europe is where you get these legends, especially in Celtic country. It's this story of this supernatural hunt. And the stories vary over time. It's especially, if you read up on Irish legends, one of the most common is that the fairies, and these are not the cute little Victorian fairies, these are scary, scary fairies you don't want to mess with, are hunting. And they're often hunting for human souls. And depending on which version of the legend you read, one of the most common is that they're hunting humans. And then you get other versions where the devil is hunting. But
they all explain sort of these crazy storms that can sweep down with very little warning and destroy everything in their path.
Right. And so this author, and I think he has I believe him on this one, he theorizes that the Wild Hunt stories came from accounts of tornadoes because they can happen anywhere. You can get them anywhere. And so these powerful, crazy storms...
But highly localized, too.
But highly localized.
They have a visible trail that you could follow of exactly where the storm went.
Right. That they must be supernatural because how else do you explain something that powerful? And... there is a Western song, which if you're from America, you've definitely heard this song. If you're from elsewhere in the world, you may not have heard it. So I'll give just a short recap. But if you're American, you've definitely heard this song. Ghost Riders in the Sky. It is this cowboy song of...
But it's like a semi-modern American echo of the Wild Hunt.
It's like a 19th century account of the Wild Hunt. It's the Wild Hunt in the Old West is what it is.
Right.
Because this cowboy is out riding and when he stops to rest, he sees this herd of devil's cattle coming across the sky. And the herders that are having to chase the devil's herd are these cowboys who have been cursed for their evil ways. And this is their penance, that they have to spend eternity trying to chase the devil's herd across those endless skies.
And in the same way, it could be an account of seeing a tornado in the distance.
Absolutely.
Absolutely happened.
Yeah, because we've seen them, and they look like that.
Yes, they do.
You can easily, we've seen them, you can easily imagine them as just this endless herd of supernatural cattle moving across the sky, because they are freaky. They are really freaky. And they're weird because on one side of the street, things will be completely destroyed. And then on the other side of the street, things will be completely untouched. It's really impossible to predict what they'll do and what they won't do.
Right.
But this book is all about that, and it's fascinating. The really good accounts start in the 19th century because the author tries to back up the story, and he tries to start in colonial America, and he describes Ben Franklin encountering some really small little mini whirlwinds.
Honestly, it didn't get interesting until settlers got to the Midwest.
Right, because there were some on the East Coast, because, you can get them anywhere, but
they were very minor.
They're at their biggest and most impressive in the Midwest. So it wasn't until the settlers got to the Midwest that you started getting these really good eyewitness accounts. And there's a really good eyewitness account in here of a tornado that touched down in October of 1871. It didn't get as much press as it probably should have because it happened on the same day as the Great Chicago Fire. And so all the newspapers were focusing on Chicago because it was a big, huge, highly populated city that had just had this devastating fire.
And of course, the weather conditions were part of what caused that giant fire.
Absolutely. But this tornado that gets described in this book was in Wisconsin, which was less populated than Chicago, obviously, but there were still a lot of people affected by this. And the account that he relates in the book was the account of a Catholic priest. So, very educated guy, very good at expressing what he saw, very reliable, because you're not going to get a Catholic priest making stuff up like this. And what happened with that tornado was that it actually turned into a fire tornado because it had sucked up the prairie fire. And so,
up there there were trees. This is a full forest fire.
That's true, because it was Wisconsin. And so the survivors were the people who had taken shelter in the river and managed to stay underwater long enough to not get burned to death, but come up for air enough to not drown, which was a
tricky balance.
Yeah. It was a tricky balance, and it was a small percentage of people who were actually involved in all this because that fire whipped up by the tornado was so hot it actually evaporated the silica particles in the ground and then those just rained down as molten glass. And so in the aftermath, everything was encased in glass because the fire had been that hot and that freaky and that scary. And this Catholic priest who'd survived it wrote the whole thing down, and it's in here, and it's really harrowing, but really interesting.
Yeah.
And then he also gets into accounts because we don't have really any good written accounts from the native tribes because they just didn't have writing systems. But there is an account by a man named Eli Moore who was the son of an Indian agent, and then he kind of went native. And there's a kind of funny thing in here. He's following around the Miami tribe, who at this point, so the Miami started out in Florida, obviously, and he sort of hooked up with them. They've been displaced onto the prairies by this point in the 19th century. And so Eli Moore, as it happened, wasn't much impressed with what his father considered civilized. This was one reason he took up with the Miami. Their dealings with whites were strictly practical. They wanted iron tools and farming implements, copper cookware, guns of all sorts, and rye whiskey. Toward the rest of white civilization, they were indifferent. Like the majority of Native Americans, they thought the whites were insane. But they did get along with young Moore well enough. They had a reason. In those days, it was said that scarcely a dozen whites west of the Mississippi could speak an Indian language, and Moore was one of them. He had gotten to be passable at the Miami tongue. He was never fluent, but the Miami appreciated his effort, and they came to consider him a friend. This was a lucky thing for Moore, because the Miami were rumored to practice ritual cannibalism upon their enemies. So, this book has great passages like that. And the reason I bring that particular one up is that when he was traveling with the Miami, they then encountered a tornado on the open prairie. Mm-hmm. And when he sees the whole tribe just suddenly look at the sky, and then they instantly start to hunker down, create shelter. He's asking what's going on, and the chief just tells him, "Devil, wind, come kill us all, maybe." He's like, "Okay," and then he tells the story of the tornado. And there are some native legends in here that got written down, but I wish there were more.
Mm-hmm. The preservation of the Thunderbird legends and such, that there's even evidence of some of that on the cliffs on the Mississippi, where when the early settlers came through, there were huge paintings and things like that, none of which survived, unfortunately.
Yeah, part of the problem was just that the population was so much in flux by then. Mm-hmm. A lot of the original tribes that lived in the plains had gotten killed off by diseases, and then the tribes that are coming in from the east in the 19th century, a lot of them are displaced peoples who don't really know what's going on either.
Right. Yeah.
So that's one of the unfortunate things. But there are some good descriptions of the prairies in here, really good descriptions of the prairies. And prairies are interesting. Mm-hmm. There's not much of them left.
Right. It's the most endangered ecosystem in America, in North America.
Yeah, we've been to a few state reserves where they're trying to preserve tiny fragments of the prairie. The place where you really find little patches of prairie still surviving, though, are if you can find an old frontier cemetery. Mm-hmm. Because the cemeteries obviously have never been farmed. And so that's where you still get the original native prairie wildflower flush in the spring and summer, and where you still see the native prairie grasses. But unfortunately, more and more of those are disappearing for various reasons. But in this book, he talks about when the prairies were the whole Midwest. Mm-hmm. And it was just this completely alien landscape with no trees, which was just really eerie to people. Mm-hmm. And occasionally you would have these wild hunt storms just sweeping down the prairies. Mm-hmm. And so it's a really great way to get a good image of this completely different world.
Because people can't even picture it anymore because we don't have any examples of it left.
No, mostly it's cornfields now.
Exactly, which are extremely different. They're a complete monoculture, and they get cut down to nothing every season. Mm-hmm. And the original tallgrass prairie was just such a varied ecosystem, and it was consistent. It stayed there through the year until a fire burned through, cleared everything out, and then it quickly sprouted again.
Yeah, I'll cut in some footage of a wildgrass prairie reserve that we have been to. That'll give you just a little, I don't even want to say a taste, because it's just an echo, really. It's a tallgrass prairie that they're trying to reseed and to get the plants going again, but it's, even with the state resources, it's still nothing like it was.
Right.
And this book describes how it was before the prairies got plowed under, and it's really, really fascinating, really cool. One of the other interesting anecdotes that he includes in this book, it's kind of grim and ghastly, but it's interesting. If there are any Wizard of Oz fans out there, of course, the protagonist is Dorothy Gale. Dorothy Gale was a real woman, actually, who got caught in a tornado, and then there was a news article about how she died because the tornado just buried her head first in the mud, and all that was sticking up were her feet. So that's where...
An interesting echo, of course, that still appears in The Wizard of Oz.
That's where Lyman Frank Baum got the idea for the Wicked Witch of the West with just her feet sticking up. But the real woman that happened to, her name was Dorothy Gale. It's pretty ghastly, but it's interesting how authors get our ideas.
Yes.
But it's a really good book, and I hope you'll check it out. And of course, I hope you're reading my books and telling your friends about them. And we hope you like this video. If you did, give it a nice thumbs up. And happy reading!